Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition and we turn now to poem 347, When Night is Almost Done. When this poem was published in 1890, it was actually titled Dawn, although obviously Emily didn't title it that. This is another poem about waking up. It might as well be thought of as well as a poem of possibly meeting or confronting one's death or the final moment of one's life. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm very hopeful that you've been able to work through our set of introductory comments, as well as working through our preceding 346 poems. We just finished with 346, Not Probable the Bear's Choice. If you have been doing this reading, then you can place a poem like this in the midst of those prior poems, and we will have seen this before. Now, the poem can be read in two different ways, as is so often the case with an Emily poem. One way to see this is simply the challenge of getting to dawn. That is to say, you wake up in the middle of the night, you're having some bad ideas or bad fears or tremors or whatever, and then you're able to finally get to the light of dawn. Obviously, there is a second reading here. We are able to make it through the night and finally to death itself in the moment of death as possible liberation. We'll see from the poem what you think. When night is almost done and sunrise grows so near that we can touch the spaces, it's time to smooth the hair and get the dimples ready and wonder we could care that the old faded midnight that frightened but an hour. Now, again, notice when night is almost done, notice night capitalized, which could be a giveaway here, that it is something symbolic. But that is to say, when you've made it through the night and it's almost time for the dawn, sunrise grows so near, we could be thinking, of course, about just making it through a hard experience and getting to the other side. Or, obviously, we could be thinking about, as night comes on and dawn will be the death, that we can touch the spaces. Now, many have said this is clearly talking about death because this touch the spaces has something to do with the arrival at eternity or something akin to it. It is time, finally, when you've made it through that experience, to, notice, smooth the hair, get the dimples ready. Some will say this is that time to wake up. Some will say what she's talking about here is to prepare the body for burial. And wonder we could care. In other words, there comes a moment when you get through a terrible experience that you're like, how did I get through that experience? And you almost wonder at how you did it, but you did it. For that old faded midnight, the use of the word old takes us back, of course, to 344, doesn't it? Faded means it's going away, midnight, that frightened but an hour. Again, this idea of frightening will take us to St. John of the Cross and the dark night of the soul. You'll remember that John of the Cross will argue we almost go through that challenge to get to a place of faith. Now, what is the point here? What is the message at 2a? I think their argument is that making it through the midnight fright makes the survival of that much more beautiful when we get to the other side. At 2b, well, obviously the metaphor of sunrise is death, or possibly sunrise is the gift of somehow sustaining or getting through is the way to think of it as well. And then how about this phrase, touch the spaces? It is a beautiful phrase. At 3a, think about our study of Thoreau's Walden. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. Do you remember what he says? We must learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical aids, but by, what's he call it? Infinite expectation of the dawn that does not forsake us in our soundest sleep. And then, as we mentioned, John of the Cross and the dark night of the soul. Finally, at 3b, what was a time when you had to make it through the dark night of the soul and you survived to dawn and the frightening experience was finally over? Thank you.